Great, thanks, Ellen. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm Barb Wolf, City Staff in the Community Development Department. We really appreciate you joining us this evening for this learning session on the Sustainable Bulky Item Management Plan that's being proposed. And just as a reminder, as you came in here, this meeting is being recorded, and we're doing that to help us so that we can capture thoughts correctly as people state them and we can refer back to it. Getting into our agenda this evening, we are scheduled to be here until 8:30. We'll start with the purpose of engagement, so you do understand why we invited you here this evening. We'll go through some meeting agreements, and then we will go into the meat of the evening by hearing from a former member of the Sustainability Commission, John Jaimes, and City Staff Laura Horner, who coordinates the garbage and recycling program, and she's our primary contact for this project. And we'll also allow some time for questions and answers to clarify the presentation information. So during that time, we will have staff available from the project team here to answer questions for you. And then we really want to get into the public feedback time. This is so that we would like to allow some space for you to share with us your reactions and your comments from the presentation with the project team. And then we'll close out and talk about next steps. So the purpose of our engagement tonight, I'll share with you the spectrum we use here at the city. It's called IAP2. And what this shows you through this process when we say engagement is what does that really mean? And how will your voice be used in this process? And so tonight we fall under consult, which is the second box there on the spectrum. And what this means is we're here to get your feedback and hear what you have to say about the approach to managing bulky item disposal in a sustainable way as we move into the future. So as part of consult, we're here to obtain feedback from the community, all of your feedback. And we're also going to keep you informed. We will hear a lot of information from John and Laura, and we will listen to and acknowledge your concerns, comments, and questions about the proposal. And that's one of the big reasons why we're recording this evening, is so all members of the project team hear what you have to say, even if they're not here tonight, and that we do capture your thoughts accurately. So we will hear about a bulky item management proposal, and based on your input, some things may move around and other ideas may be considered. So in general, the structure will remain the same, and you will hear about that during the presentation this evening. The recommendations will be made by the Sustainability Commission and city staff, and they have final recommendation to the City Council, and then the City Council will actually make the final decision. The Sustainability Commission and City Council meetings are all open to the public, and you can watch them live, or you can watch them after, anytime really that is convenient for you. And so I'd encourage you to do that. And then also at this time, I do want to note on your screen, if it, using this WebEx that's a little unfamiliar to some people, on the left side of your screen, if you hover your mouse over there, you'll see a plus button and a minus button. And if you click that plus button, you can increase the font size so that your view, you can see it where it's best for you to view the presentation. Okay. Moving into our meeting agreements, these are agreements that we establish at the beginning of most of our meetings, whether they're internally or externally, but especially when we're doing engagement. The first is that we ask you to be respectful during our time this evening. Be honest. Honesty is really important as we're listening to your input. And all ideas tonight do have good intent. So with this in mind, we are here to listen to everybody's perspective and for everybody that decided to take time out of their evening to join us. And all of the voices are important in this process. So we do ask that you hold that agreement for everybody and that all ideas have good intent, even if you don't agree with an idea that's being shared. And then just to have an open mind. We're here to listen to people from the community with different backgrounds and have an open mind as we're hearing different perspectives from your own. Also, we do have a couple of administrative agreements. We do have a chat box feature. This is similar to using Zoom meetings. So if you've participated in those with the chat boxes, if you go to the bottom right of your screen, you can click on chat to open the chat box. And you may already see some messages in there from Ellen, who is here to monitor that chat box this evening. Ellen Bialis is a deputy director of public works at the city, and she's part of our project team. And so this chat box is here for you to use during our entire time here this evening. Everything that is submitted via the chat box will be saved in the notes and shared with the project team and the Sustainability Commission. And that does include messages that are sent privately among attendees and those that are also sent to the group. So just be aware of all those messages will be captured. And this is a space that you can submit questions here. We also do ask that during this time you do mute your microphone when you aren't speaking, just to avoid the background noise and distractions when people are presenting. Sometimes you're not aware that you're making background noise and it's accidentally done, but we do have the ability to mute you. So just keep in mind, if we do mute you and you need to speak, you would have to take yourself off of mute. We do have a couple of callers that are participating using a telephone. As Ellen stated at the beginning, when it comes time for questions and for submitting comments, she will unmute you. So just be aware at that time on your phone, you will have to mute your own self if you're not speaking during that time. Okay, getting in here, I'd like to just highlight before we get into the presentation, how to participate this evening. I mentioned the chat box, and that is available to you throughout the course of our time together, where you can make comments or ask questions. Once we do reach a period where we're pausing for questions, we will address those that were submitted in the chat box first, and then allow space for clarifying questions, especially from the phone callers who do not have access to the chat box. And again, all comments will be saved and shared with the project team and the Sustainability Commission. So whether you choose to participate either verbally or via the chat box, all comments will be saved, and really both ways are great ways to participate. At that time, when we come to the verbal portion, you are able to unmute yourself and participate during that time. So with the amount of people that we anticipate on the call this evening, we are asking that you limit your comments to under 2 minutes. So that is something that I will be monitoring during that feedback time. So during the presentation this evening, I do encourage you to grab a pen and paper and just jot down your key thoughts or ideas that you'd like to share, so you make good use of that time. I also have a note here to observe the 5-second rule. You know, with these virtual meetings, there can be blank space, and it can make some people feel uncomfortable. Just allow a little bit of space to sit after somebody speaks, so that as people jump into a new conversation, the first person has finished speaking. So just maybe give a silent count to yourself to 5 in your head and allow that space before you do jump into the conversation. We may get it where 2 people jump in at the same time or something like that, but we'll just be mindful to have one person go at a time and give everybody the opportunity to share and take turns. Certainly glad and very appreciative to see everyone here tonight, so we're going to do our best to make sure that we hear from everybody. If you are someone who thinks of things after the fact, like you hear this information and you really want to reflect on it, we will provide some contact information at the end. So you are welcome to share additional thoughts via email. If you prefer to write a letter or pick up the phone and make a phone call, you do have the ability to make those comments, and we will be collecting those for the next few weeks. So you will have a further opportunity if you are not able to contribute this evening, or if you think of something after this fact. We really do encourage comments from everybody. We do have a survey out there at blm.mn/bulk, and that survey does reflect some of what we're asking here tonight. So this is another great way to provide input, or maybe you're just more comfortable typing out responses instead of speaking at a meeting like this. So that space is available to you as well, if that's more comfortable for you. So at this time, I'd like to introduce to you former commission member John Hymas, and John will kick us off with our presentation this evening.
Thank you, Barb. Good evening, everybody. I'm John Jaimes. I'm a former member of the Sustainability Commission. I served from 2017 through 2020, and I served and still serve on the work group that developed the proposed changes to the annual cleanup program. We all know that the curbside cleanup is a very popular program in our city, but it's also a very challenging program to operate. City Council has been discussing how to make changes to the way that bulky items are managed for many years. The curbside cleanup program is costly. It's becoming increasingly challenging for haulers to operate the program. And most importantly, it's not environmentally sustainable. So in 2019, the City Council requested that the Sustainability Commission look at potential opportunities to reduce the impact of our curbside cleanup program. As a result, the Commission created a work group made up of commissioners and staff to develop and evaluate alternatives to the program. We looked at the types of items that are picked up at the curb and to what extent those items are reused or recycled. The data provided from the study that was done really is a foundation for our proposal for how bulky items like fridges, tables, mattresses, etc., can be managed more sustainably. We brought forward our recommendations to the City Council in May of last year, and at that time we received direction to continue developing our plan and to bring the plan forward to the community for feedback, which is what we're doing right now. The purpose of the cleanup program has always been to keep our city clean by providing residents with a method of disposing of bulky items that are difficult to get rid of. We do this to ensure that they don't end up in people's backyards, dumped in our parks, or down in the Minnesota River Valley. The program, for those of you who don't know, I didn't know this until we started looking at this program. The program started in the 1960s and was originally part of a citywide neighborhood cleanup effort called Clean Up, Paint Up, and Fix Up. The program was designed to help beautify the city and was originally paid for by citywide general taxes. Believe it or not, the program was discontinued in the 1980s due to budget constraints, and the program started up again in the late 1990s, and the costs this time were paid for by a fee to all residential properties, which is still the way that it operates. Due to its cost and environmental impact, in 2018, the city placed limits on the amount of stuff that residents could put out at the curb and strictly enforces those limits. The limits have helped to reduce the cost and the amount of waste generated, but it still is not an environmentally or a cost sustainable program. This slide that you're looking at lists the primary ecological drivers for making a change to this program. The program generates a lot of waste. And to put that in perspective, in 2019, the city's residential garbage program, just when you set out your regular trash every week, that generated just over 17,500 tons of garbage in the entire year, not including the curbside cleanup. In that same year, the haulers picked up 1,500 tons of garbage during curbside cleanup. That's roughly 9% of the weight of our residential garbage for an entire year, but only during 5 days. Also, landfills generate huge amounts of methane, which is 84 times more potent of a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. The carbon footprint for getting this trash to the landfill is also extremely high, approximately 60 tons of carbon just to haul the material to the landfill from the curbside cleanup program. These pictures show common examples of items that are put at the curb. If you look closely, they don't really look like trash. And in fact, the 2019 study referenced earlier concluded that 35%, more than a third of the items that are put out at the curb, could likely be reused or recycled. Often we hear from residents that the stuff that is put out on the curb always gets picked up by reusers, and nothing of quality gets put in the garbage truck. Excuse me. But that's not what the study showed. All of the items in these pictures were landfilled during the 2019 cleanup. And all of these items were left over after people had picked through the piles. All of the survey data, all of the photos were taken on the morning of the actual pickup days. And so take a look at those photos. You can see there's a lot of material, a lot of items that could definitely be reused or recycled. Shown here is the state's waste hierarchy that lists the environmentally preferred options for managing waste. This is an expansion of the common reduce, reuse, recycle hierarchy that we use when talking about preferred methods of dealing with things that we want to get rid of. As you can see, landfilling is the least preferred environmental option. Our weekly trash is taken to the Hennepin Energy Recovery Facility, also known as HERC, where it is incinerated and creates steam heat for downtown Minneapolis and is converted into electricity, which is sold to the grid. Unfortunately, this facility is not designed to take the bulky items that are put out as part of the curbside cleanup program. The items collected during the curbside cleanup program don't go to the HERC to be incinerated, but typically are landfilled in Burnsville. This visualization was created by Bloomington staff and shows the probable peak size of the proposed Burnsville sanitary landfill expansion. As you may know, our city has taken a position in opposition to this expansion, as well as many of our residents. In 2019, our curbside cleanup refuse was sent to this landfill. So that waste, equal to the weight of approximately 160 snowplows, fed this potential mountain, which when full will be the highest elevation in either Burnsville or Bloomington, and will likely be visible from the southern part of our city. So here's the conundrum. We don't want this trash mountain, which would be visible from the southern part of our city, but at the same time, we need some place to dispose of the approximately 1,500 to 2,000 tons of trash that gets collected every year from the curbside cleanup program. What I've reviewed so far is the data and the context that the work group used to begin to consider and evaluate alternatives to this program. And we also wanted to ensure that any proposed alternative is consistent with the city's strategic priorities and the overall purpose of the annual cleanup program. Here's what the working group stated should be achieved with the plan. These are the criteria that we use to evaluate alternatives. Keeping Bloomington clean, or more specifically, don't create a program where frustrated residents want to illegally dump their bulky items. Increase the environmental benefits by reducing the carbon footprint through maximizing recycling and reuse of all of those items that are put out at the curb that still could be recycled and reused. Improved cost effectiveness by minimizing the cost, and improving accessibility by making the program available to as many residents as possible. After reviewing our study data, brainstorming the ideas, and looking what other cities are doing in the metro area, the work group proposed a new model: bulky item vouchers paired with community cleanup events. Given the analysis, which Laura will walk us through next, the clear winner is a voucher program paired with community cleanup event. It provides the greatest ecological benefit, the lowest cost, and the broadest accessibility. It is a little less convenient, but you have all those other benefits. So now I'm going to turn it over to Laura Horner, who will provide a brief overview of what a voucher program paired with the community cleanup event might look like, and provide a comparison of all of the options using the strategic priorities and values.
Good evening. I'm Laura Horner, the city's Garbage and Recycling Program Coordinator. And thank you again for allowing us to share more information with you all this evening about the proposed plan and for your willingness to share feedback with us tonight. So the proposed plan includes two different methods to handle bulky items. To continue offering some sort of curbside pickup, each household in the city's garbage and recycling program would receive 2 vouchers that are each good for the collection of a bulky item. For example, this could be an old refrigerator, a television, a mattress, or a couch. The resident would schedule the bulky item pickup like they do now through utility billing, and residents could schedule this anytime throughout the year. In a voucher system like this, those mattresses, appliances, and electronics could be recycled. So the other part of the proposed plan includes holding 1 or 2 community cleanup drop-off events each year. Residents would bring their items to a central location to dispose of on a single day. The drop-off events would be open for any Bloomington resident. So this would include people who live in apartment buildings, condominiums, or townhomes that don't have the city's garbage and recycling service and might not have had access to the curbside cleanup program we have now today. The picture on this slide gives you an idea of what that drop-off event could look like. The city would contract with several different vendors to be on site at one central location to collect materials. And this allows those materials that residents bring to be sorted into several different categories for recycling and reuse. Some examples of what you could recycle would include, again, mattresses, tires, appliances, electronics, and shredded paper. We also could have a reuse area where residents could shop and take home reusable items. So in these next couple slides, we will compare this proposal and the city's current curbside cleanup program against the reasons why we were looking to make a change to the program and what we're really trying to accomplish by meeting the city's strategic priorities of environmental sustainability, a high quality service, and inclusion and equity. So to start with, when looking at environmental sustainability, in our current program, appliances and brush during the curbside cleanup are collected separately for recycling and composting. This amounted to 155 tons of material that was recycled in 2019 during the cleanup. We know that there is also some reuse that happens during the cleanup as people survey piles and pick up items that they want to take home or possibly fix up and sell. We can't know for certain where all of those materials end up or if they ultimately end up getting disposed of as garbage anyways. So when considering the vouchers plus a community cleanup event, the amount that could be diverted nearly doubles, as that material could be sorted for further reuse and recycling at a drop-off event. So the next thing we will look at is the cost effectiveness of our current curbside cleanup program compared to the on-call vouchers plus a community cleanup event. We were able to develop estimated costs based on the cost to hold similar drop-off events in neighboring cities, and we received a cost proposal from a vendor who was willing to give us pricing for the voucher service. So when looking at the cost of each option, our current curbside cleanup costs the city around $1 million each year. The cost for our current program has increased over the past few years. And in 2020, the final cost for the program was just over $1 million. The higher cost was due in part to residents setting out more garbage than they did in 2019, 1,500 tons in 2019 versus 2,000 tons in 2020. And also because the cost to dispose of garbage continues to increase as landfills are increasingly reluctant to take this volume of material. For the 2021 cleanup, the cost of disposal of garbage at the landfills has increased again by 8.5%. And this will further increase our disposal costs this year. The current curbside cleanup program is paid for through a fee to all cities with the city through a fee to all residents with the city's garbage and recycling service. During our research on what the proposed plan might cost, we found that that could cost roughly half the amount of money. So we could realize a significant savings in this proposed plan. At this time, we don't have final cost figures on what the proposed plan might cost. As we're in the community engagement piece now, we will go back to council for final approval, and at that point go out for bid for these services to get final cost figures. However, if the cost figures are what we anticipate they will be, that cost savings would be passed on to residents through a reduction in that curbside cleanup fee. The next thing we'll look at is inclusion and equity. How accessible is our current program for multifamily dwellings? Currently, our curbside cleanup program is not accessible to those households. There are a few that do opt into the service, and they can do that by paying for each unit in the townhome or apartment building to participate. We don't have very many that do choose to opt in, but there are some that opt in. The on-call voucher plus a community cleanup event, this would be, the community drop-off events would be accessible to all residents, so that would include multifamily dwellings. And those vouchers would be accessible to residents with our city garbage and recycling service. And lastly, we looked at the accessibility for those without vehicles or with limited mobility. This is where our current curbside cleanup program we know is very convenient and accessible. It does not require the use of a vehicle. An on-call voucher system plus the community cleanup event would be somewhat less convenient. It still would be accessible for residents in the fact that the vouchers would allow you to still dispose of items without a vehicle. However, the drop-off portion would not be accessible without a vehicle. So in summary, the working group brainstormed and discussed several different alternatives to the current program and thoroughly analyzed the only alternatives that most closely align with the city's strategic priorities and values. We do believe that the recommended alternative, a program that includes bulky item vouchers paired with these community cleanup events, does provide the greatest environmental benefit by reducing the carbon footprint and diverting more material from the landfill. It also provides a greater accessibility to the greatest number of Bloomington residents and provides a reduction in cost. We do know that this is a significant change from the current curbside cleanup program, and it would make it a little bit less convenient. And because of that, we know that any changes will require significant education and community outreach for the real reasons why we're making these changes. So with that, thank you again for allowing us to share our proposed plan with you all this evening. And at this time, we would like to turn the floor over to all of you to hear your feedback. We will have two different sections, as Barb noted earlier, where we will hear from you all. And in this first section, we want to answer questions only. So if you have any questions about what we are proposing, we would like to get those questions answered here first. I will be able to answer those questions and also may ask Ellen Bialis and John Hymas to provide some input on the responses as well. And after that, we will switch to gathering your feedback, and Barb will facilitate that portion. So at this time, if you do have a question, you can go ahead and unmute and ask the question. Or if you would rather not ask us a question verbally, you can certainly put those into the chat box. I will take a look at the chat box now to see if there were specific questions to get us started. And if we continue to receive a lot of questions in that chat and we're not able to get to all of them, we will certainly make these questions and answers available on our Let's Talk Bloomington page for more information.
Can you
So-
hear me? Can you hear me? Am I being heard?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I'm one of the phone people, so I
Sure.
haven't been able to see the pictures. But
Okay.
it's going to end up being a question, but I am one of the people who thinks that reusing of things is very important. My concern is that it sounds like you're thinking in terms of almost having like a big swap meet where people bring things to, let's call it a big field. I don't know where you'd be doing it, but first of all, what type of place would people bring things to? Would they be able to lay things out in groupings? For example, garden pots in this area, old furniture in that area, so that other people could come and take those usable items. That's my concern, because I kind of disagree with what you said, that there was so much that was being thrown away, because I have seen so much picked up by people. But this is a question time, so I won't get into that. But how were you planning on having this swap meet thing?
Certainly. So we would look for locations within the city that would allow for really good traffic flow and allow for a reuse area where residents would be able to bring those types of items for others to take a look at and shop around. We know that the one potential place we've looked at is the city's western maintenance lot. It's a big open space that does have that good traffic flow, a big circle where different vendors could be collecting items, and also a different area where we could allow for reuse. So it's certainly going to be a big part of planning the actual events to make sure that we find spaces that would allow enough room for people to shop around in a reuse area and also easily access an event to drop things off for recycling.
Laura, in the chat box, there's one suggestion or question about whether.
Hi, what would happen to all the extra stuff, like after you are done with this kind of swap and reuse? What would happen to all of that waste?
So in our research with other cities, there are different organizations that could take that. I know that Bridging might be interested in taking some of the leftover reusable items, as well as other organizations that accept reusable items. So I think that would be our first intention, is to bring those items to organizations that want them. If, of course, there are items that are left over that organizations don't want, those would ultimately end up getting landfilled.
We've heard from friends in Eden Prairie that when they have their community event, sometimes they're sitting waiting 3 to 4 hours to get up to get rid of their materials. I don't know how that's going to work in the city the size of Bloomington on a one-day event a couple times a year.
Ellen, I don't know if you want to share a little bit of your experience in St. Paul with these events.
Sure. I think with these events, there are some ways to try and help mitigate wait times for people. And part of that is by having a large enough site so that drop-off can be spread out very well. And, that cuts down on wait times. In St. Paul, they do offer these type of drop-off events throughout the year. And sometimes there's a little bit of a wait if everybody shows up at a particular time. But otherwise, they're typically able to move people through fairly rapidly to drop off their materials and get moved on.
Looks like there's a question in the chat or a comment that I think is something we could kind of respond to, is that there will be residents that don't have the ability to transport items to a central site. And then an option, even during present model, would be to recruit volunteers and provide them with vehicles to retrieve reusable items and provide them to the bridging or Goodwill. So during our current curbside cleanup program, we have worked with Ziegler in the past and a volunteer group through that company to provide assistance to residents with limited mobility to get materials out to the curb. So we would continue in a drop-off model to look for organizations that might be able to help those residents without access to a vehicle to get those materials to a central location. So as we continue to develop this model, that is something that we will be looking to do.
Is every resident going to be charged for 2 vouchers regardless? Is that your current plan?
Yes, that is currently the plan, to charge each resident for those 2 vouchers. And again, that would be a significant reduction in our current curbside cleanup fee.
How
Would that be the only cost then on that for this, is to have to pay for 2 vouchers to the homeowner?
At this point, we do think that that voucher cost would really be the only cost in that curbside cleanup fee. So that would be significantly reduced. However, we are still kind of developing this program, and there might be additional kind of educational costs that would be included in there as well. For example, what to do with items, maybe where you could take them for reuse. But it still does appear that that cost could be reduced significantly.
I guess my concern is that I've lived in Bloomington for over 50 years. I have never disposed of a mattress or appliance or these bulky items. I mean, I've always had other ways in which they got disposed of. So there must be other people who just don't get rid of. I mean, I'm sorry. I would never have used 2 vouchers in the last 30 years.
Have you looked at other models for that? Like, have you looked at just charging people if they need a bulky item pickup instead of charging every resident in the community regardless of if they use a service or not?
Sure. Ellen, do you want to speak to the costs for that?
Sure. We did kind of look at what it would cost for us to just basically only charge people who would be, contracting to get just a pickup of 1 or 2 bulky items. The difficulty in that is that it becomes very expensive for our haulers and others to do that without having kind of a volume of people who are participating in the program. So essentially right now with the curbside pickup, I think residents pay about, is it $53, $54 a year, Laura, for, putting out everything on the curb and all of that. Which if a resident had to just contract with a hauler on their own to do it, that would be the price that they would likely pay for just 1 item to be picked up. And so the cost becomes really prohibitive very quickly if we don't negotiate a lower price for having a volume of pickups available in the city. So when we take a look at, sort of what it is for us to negotiate a lower price with the haulers, it becomes almost 1/3 to 1/2 of the price that somebody would have to pay on their own. There is, of course, some equity in having the people who actually use the service pay for it. But what concerns us about that is that if the price becomes so expensive that people don't want to make use of the program, then they start getting rid of stuff inappropriately by throwing it in the parks or throwing it on the side of the road, or leaving it in their neighbor's yard or somewhere else in the city. So we don't want the cost to be so high that people don't make use of the program.
In one of your slides, you had that only 25% of residents in one city and 7%, I think, in St. Paul actually use the vouchers. So I guess I'm just concerned about how you're justifying a cost for every resident in Bloomington to serve 25% of the population, in addition to having reduced accessibility for people that don't have the ability, or, the curbside, I think, got people to put out their stuff to take it out. You're kind of reducing that ability for people with this. So if you're concerned about trash in the city, it seems like this would be more prime for that. So anyway, back to my original question, how are you kind of justifying the cost for everyone to serve just a few?
Laura, I can take that again if you'd like. We're looking at it as a system that kind of serves the whole community. So when we're looking at it, we're looking at the ability to make it accessible to everybody. And we think that having the voucher system does continue to have some accessibility for people to have stuff picked up from their homes. But it's really a system approach so that everybody has access to the service. Much like we do with our recycling program and our garbage program to an extent, the ability for us to negotiate a lower fee for all residents means that as a system, it's available to people when they need to use it.
Ellen, I think that that's part of the problem, is that multiple people now have asked the question of why the entire city needs to pay for a service that they don't use. Statistically, I think Laura has presented that 60% of the city uses that service on those Saturdays. I find that hard to believe. When I look out on my neighborhood, I don't believe that that's the participation rate. I would be more in favor of requiring people to pay for a voucher to have their stuff picked up. The lady who lived here for 50 years, if this service restarted around 2000, she spent about $1,100 plus and has never used the service. Why would we require residents to pay if they don't use it? And by the way, I don't use it either.
Thank you for that. I'm the lady who's been here forever. I like what you said in many ways, but in some ways, I do use the curbside pickup. I have never had big items, so the voucher system is what I was questioning as being no value to me. So the voucher of 2 big items is of no value, and I don't anticipate needing it for several more years, okay? But I do really like the ability to kind of go scrounging. I have brought home many wonderful things on curbside pickup that are now in my garden. I have furniture, I have lawn furniture, I have big, huge pots for the garden. I have fencing that I use to keep the bunny rabbits out. And I mean, it doesn't really matter, but these are things that were totally usable and they were going to be thrown out, but I saw them by the side of the road and I brought them home and now they're in use. That's the benefit of curbside pickup, is the ability to take something that someone else does not have a use for, and someone who does have a use for it puts it to work good, puts it to good use, not saying it right. In addition to that, I really appreciate when I see people coming through the city and they are bringing home, they're taking things from curbside pickup to repair, and then they're going to sell them. I think that's absolutely fabulous. What better way of being green is there to take something that maybe is not good enough to be given to Goodwill? Bridging, I love bridging, really do, but they're very critical, are very particular about what they're willing to accept. And they don't accept a lot of things sometimes. And whereas these people who are out there scrounging will take things that are maybe not quite so wonderful and they'll fix them up, they'll renovate them, and then maybe they'll even go sell them to somebody. I think that's fabulous. But to me, that is recycling and reusing in a good way.
Yes, ma'am. I totally agree with you on that. I think that the recycling side of it is extremely important. However, there's some negatives with that. Some of our friends that recycle also make a mess of the piles each and every night as they scrounge through stuff. And, you know, that's an ancillary problem. I think the bigger issue is that there's a percentage of Bloomington residents that do not use the service. I do not think I should pay for it. That's my point. Thank you for your time.
This is Barb. I'm just going to interject here. These are great comments that we're receiving. And I just want to clarify for right now, we just want to make sure from the presentation that we had, if there's any clarifying questions, otherwise we can move right into the comment period. So I'm going to ask at this time if there's any more clarifying questions from the presentation.
Do you know how much each voucher would cost, ballpark?
Yeah, based on an initial evaluation, we think that it might cost about $1.70 for those 2 vouchers, $1.70 a month.
So Laura, that'd be a little bit around like $25 a year or something like that.
Yeah, so it would be less than half of the cost of the current curbside cleanup program.
Okay, did we have any more questions? Last call for questions there. Okay, so then we'll move into our feedback time together. And just as a reminder, we are asking that you limit your comments to under 2 minutes so that we can hear from everybody on the call who wants to contribute verbally. However, you can still make comments in the chat box or ask your questions there if you choose to do so. And you can type and submit those comments at any time between now and the end of our meeting, and we will save those. So just a reminder here to be respectful, be honest, assume good intent, and have an open mind. And then just a suggestion for framing your thoughts for this section. We do have some questions listed here. Again, we've been talking about the bulky item vouchers, and some people have already expounded on this. What do you like about the plan and what concerns you? And then also the drop-off events. What do you like about them or what concerns you? What items may be difficult for you to get rid of? And are there other items that you would like to be able to recycle through a drop-off other than those that were mentioned earlier by John? And then lastly, do you use other methods for getting rid of items other than the curbside cleanup, like donating or selling them online or through a garage sale? So we'll go ahead and this time then people can make comments. And just as a reminder, I will have a timer in front of me. So I just ask for people to keep their comments under 2 minutes. So I'll go ahead and open that for people that want to speak verbally.
To start with, by introduction, for those that weren't online very early before the meeting started, I'm the treasurer of a condominium association that has currently opted out of the curbside cleanup. I would like to echo the concerns of people talking about charging everybody, because that's why we got out of the program. It's because in total, the bulky items that were being picked up is less than the over $4,000 the association was paying to be a participant of the program. And we have just said to our owners, if you've got something that you need picked up, you need to make arrangements for it on a one and go type deal. And you are responsible then for the payment rather than forcing it onto everybody.
Okay, thank you for your comments, Dale.
I can't unmute it.
You are unmuted. We can hear you. What's your name?
Oh, my name is Pat.
Hi, Pat. You can go ahead and make your comments.
All right. What I don't understand is if the $25 per year is going to be for the bulky item pickup, then how is the rest of the program going to be paid for? Are each of the residents, including the condos and townhomes and apartments, are they going to be paying for the drop-off piece?
Pat, I think Ellen or Laura, if you can address that, that might be a good question to answer here.
Laura, you're on mute.
Thought I had just unmuted myself, but sorry. The drop-off events, there would be a charge for what you're bringing in. Some items would be collected at no charge. There would be likely a small charge for some of those items that can be more costly to manage, like in electronics. And the city would try and subsidize the charges using a grant we received from Hennepin County for recycling. So we could help bring down the cost of some of those items that residents bring to a drop-off. But that voucher program would be paid for through the utility bill, and the drop-off events would not be paid for through your utility bill. If you chose to bring materials, you would likely incur a small charge for some of the items you bring.
Thanks for that clarification, Laura.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pat.
I just have a couple more comments. I think that getting rid of the curbside program, might be fine, but the trash that you're picking up in curbside is going to find its way to a landfill in another way. All the stuff that's not bulky items, people are just going to throw it instead of having, others drive through our communities and pick it up. And it is nice to see that people are picking up truckloads of things on these curbside cleanup days to reuse them. That stuff's going to end up in the trash because people don't want to go through the pain of selling it online or driving around to find somewhere to donate it that then won't accept it. So those things are going to end up in the landfill anyway. It might not be measurable by the city of Bloomington, but it's going to go there. And my other comment is that those voucher systems, if we're having such a small percentage of people use it, which you guys have put in your presentation, that a minority of residents use the voucher system in other communities, some as low as 7%, then I don't think at all everyone should pay for that. That should be a service paid for by the resident that uses it.
Thanks, Alicia, for your comments.
I've got a question.
Go ahead.
Has the staff or the Sustainability Commission calculated the value of everything that gets reused and recycled under the current system at absolutely no cost to the city whatsoever?
Sir, there really is no good way for us to be able to do that because we can't calculate what people are picking up and we can't know ultimately what they do with that material once they've picked it up from the curb. What we do know is what we found when we went out and studied the piles right before the trucks came through. And at that point in time, we knew that about, like we say, about 35% of the materials that were still out on the curb right before the trucks came through was stuff that could have potentially been reused or recycled. And instead, basically the city paid to have that sent right to the landfill.
So you're making a recommendation based on what you find it easy to measure, not what is really happening in the real world. I'm one of those people who puts stuff out, and the city ought to encourage it going out a day or two earlier than just before the pickup. And almost all of the stuff I put out, somebody else comes by and decides that they could find a use for it. And the junk I put out, quite frankly, things that have no usable parts and there are no parts to fix it, is junk. I'm sorry, some stuff goes to the landfill or PERC because there is no further use for it. Sorry about that. I think you're measuring what you can easily measure and not the real value of the program. Somebody else mentioned earlier, and I'll agree, I'm a big supporter of bridging. From the very first day that bridging started with Fran, but bridging charges to pick up a lot of stuff, and they don't pick up very much stuff. I find that's true of some of the other free pickups, so-called free pickups too. I just don't see this program as proposed as being an improvement at all. And as to those people who don't put things out so they don't think they should pay for it, well, we don't have children in the schools anymore. So does that mean I shouldn't pay for the schools? We've never had a fire, so should I pay for the fire department? This is a public service and we ought to pay for it.
Thank you very much for your comments.
I have an idea for the curbside, not curbside pickup, but what if the city was to have a day in which you just simply, and it could even be the way we have it, one Saturday divided into four, for a month, where we divide the city into 4 quadrants like we do it now. But what if we had it so that people could put things that they think might be usable, okay, out on the curb. And I always put my things out on the curb in a way I kind of display it, like I'm creating a way for people to see it easily, okay? And that, by the way, also stops people from making a big mess out of your pile. But I'll lay things out neatly. And if we had that as how about this Saturday, put out your things and everybody can come grab things, with the understanding that if stuff is not taken, you as the homeowner have to take it back and maybe put it in your own trash can. What about that as an idea?
Thank you for stating your idea. We appreciate that.
Hi, I have a few questions in the chat that I'm going to ask now. And I'm wondering if we're maximizing the efforts to reduce the number of usable items that are being landfilled or hitting the curb. Are we doing enough educating around other options? Everyone's aware of bridging. It's come up several times tonight, but other options for getting rid of items that are usable, next door, marketplace, etc. I'm just wondering if we're responding to a problem rather than preventing a problem. Number 2, have we considered conducting the program following the citywide garage sale? I said ale, which might apply to me in my garage, but garage sale to allow people to sell by items before they hit the curb. That's always been a question of mine, and wonder if that would reduce the number of items that are hitting the curb, giving people the opportunity to sell something.
What do you think about the plan?
Rather than throwing it out to the curb. And lastly, I just wonder, are they going to be able to define what is a bulky item that will require a voucher? And maybe I'm not quite understanding that process completely, but I mean, is it just a chair a bulky item, or is it a recliner, or is it a couch, or just what exactly is a bulky item?
I appreciate that, Greg. Thank you.
Laura, would you want to answer a few of those questions, or?
Excuse me, Ellen, just as a reminder, those that are on phones, to mute yourself when you're not speaking. And there was a caller that wanted to talk?
Yes, I have a great story. I had a lazy boy that I brought to Salvation Army. No, it was ARC. Remember when ARC was on American Boulevard? And they, or Value Village, they would not accept it. It was not good enough quality. And you know, with any of a place that you donate, then they have to handle it, and then they have to charge for it versus just putting it out. So I brought the item back. It was a lazy boy, put it on my curb, and then someone wanted it for free. So it was a great example of a piece of furniture that someone liked because it was free, but ARC did not like and would not accept.
Thank you.
I clicked on this Barbara Wolf thing and I brought up all this and people were talking. One guy was really good. He was pointing out, I put stuff out to people.
Hi, Stephen. We can hear you.
Oh.
Did you have a comment you wanted to make?
Well, no, I just had a lot of trouble getting into this. That's all.
Okay, I'm sorry about that.
Okay. You have a comment? Well, I don't know what happened. I clicked on her before and this guy was talking here.
Yeah, Stephen, we can still hear you. So if you're calling in on a phone, you'll just want to hit mute so that we don't hear you unless you want to make a comment. And Ellen, maybe you can just help him out with that. Any other comments?
Yeah, so what happens as a result of all these meetings, these listening sessions? Then what's the result of them?
Laura or Ellen, did you want to address that?
Sure. So we are taking public feedback throughout the month of March, and then we're going to spend the next month or two kind of compiling that feedback and maybe making some changes to our plan based on that. And then the Sustainability Commission and staff would return to council with the recommended proposal in early summer. And at that time, it would be council's ultimate decision how to move forward.
Thank you, Laura.
I have one other question, and is this program going to duplicate any of the Hennepin County hazardous waste drop-off that we already have in Bloomington?
Sure, I can respond to that as well. And John, you might have a little insight there too, as he works for Hennepin County. But the Hennepin County drop-off site is really designed to take hazardous waste and problem materials. So there are several items that you could dispose of through the curbside, this new model, that wouldn't be accepted at those drop-off sites. And some of those items include a large electronic. Anything that's heavier than 50 pounds is not accepted at the drop-off sites right now, and same with large appliances, as well as items like furniture and tires. And John, are there any other specific items that you could think of?
Yeah, I mean, there would be some overlap between the proposed program and what you can drop off at the Hennepin County drop-off. So mattresses would be an overlap. You mentioned appliances. I think the difference is the reason why there would be some overlap is just because of the accessibility piece. As several people have mentioned, some people would be unable to haul their material to some place to be disposed of. So through the voucher program, someone would come and collect it from your residence. So we realize that there is some overlap, but we think that that's, you know, I don't see where that's a negative to the program. The vast majority of bulky items that could be picked up through this proposed program, those items are not accepted at the Hennepin County drop-off.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
Hi, good evening. Are you guys able to hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Michael.
Hey, Barbara, thank you. Yeah, just a few questions or comments, if I could. Just want to make sure I understand. Did you say you guys feel there's about 60% participation in the program, in the curbside cleanup right now?
Yes, that's right. That's what we see in the set out rates studies that we conduct each year.
Okay, thanks, Laura. And I guess with the goal with this, like with what you're proposing, I think you're not sure how many people would use the voucher system, but would the goal be to kind of see that same 60% or a growth in how many people in the community use the voucher plus community pickup event?
Yes, our ultimate goal is to continue to promote that so more residents would utilize the service.
Okay, so with the voucher system plus the community event days, or while you would target kind of the same, at least same participation, maybe some growth, the thought is that community events are going to have less resulting in going to the landfill, more of it ending up being reused than what it is today with the curbside cleanup.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, just wondering, like, what kind of study, or why do you think that there'd be less ending up in the landfill with those community pickup days versus what you see happening on curbside cleanup? Like, I guess the assumption is that more people are gonna, at least the same amount of people are gonna go to those community cleanup event days, and you'll have more activity there with people picking up the reuse materials. Or I guess I'm just trying to understand how you kind of foresee less ending up in a landfill than what the curbside cleanup does today.
Sure. Well, at that drop-off event, we would be kind of working with several different vendors to collect more materials that could be recycled and reused that currently would be landfilled during the curbside cleanup when the hauler ultimately does pick those up. So when they're brought to that drop-off event, a mattress, for example, that would have been landfilled could be recycled.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Michael.
But wouldn't someone that's going to get rid of a mattress do the bulk item voucher?
Sure, and those would also, in our plan, get recycled as well.
So do you have,
Easier for us to recycle in low volume and picked up as opposed to being out all at once.
No,
Would you like to explain how you recycle a mattress?
Sure, there is an organization called Second Chance Recycling in Minneapolis, where they actually have staff that deconstruct the mattresses, and then each different component part of the mattress is recycled. So they have kind of a baler for all of the steel springs in a mattress, and they take the cotton or different filling from the mattress and recycle that in addition to that fabric.
And what volume are they capable of handling? The St. Cloud company that attempted that and the nonprofit found that they had supply and demand problems. And the big problem was who wanted the raw materials. Have you looked through the supply chain, or are you just thinking that if you show up, they'll take it?
No, we did work with them as we were developing this plan to get a sense of how many mattresses they might be able to collect for recycling. And based on our study, we were able to give them a number of mattresses we anticipate or we might generate in a year to give them, and they felt that they would be able to handle that and did give us pricing for taking that material to recycle. They do currently work with the city of Minneapolis to collect mattresses curbside and haven't had any real demand or supply issues to actually get that material recycled.
How many mattresses did you tell them you thought you could come up with in Bloomington based on your new collection plan?
I have to go back and look through those numbers, but I believe it was about like 3,000. And I can come back to you with that, but
3,000 mattresses a year.
that's
Is that
right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And what happens to those mattresses right now?
Well, right now those are landfilled. Those would be the amount of mattresses that we're estimating were landfilled during the 2019 study.
And how did you do your estimate of mattresses going to landfills?
So during that 2019 study, we worked with several different people to go out and actually audit curbside cleanup piles. So they had a tally sheet and they marked if they saw a mattress and the condition that mattress was in, or if they saw an appliance or a bicycle or whatever that material was. So based on those numbers that we received in the study, we were able to extrapolate that based on the number of residents that typically participate in the cleanup as to what and again, that would be an estimate, but it's a fairly good estimate of what we believe is landfilled each year.
And what was the result of your study if you, after everybody's picked through the piles, and I'm sorry if they mess the piles up, but you know, we do live in an urban suburban environment, and this is only 1 week per area per year. But what if you had a big truck that came and picked up mattresses and things the staff is sure can get recycled, and then the garbage truck comes and picks up the deciduous, the remainder that goes to the landfill? Wouldn't that be a whole lot more efficient and spend far fewer BTUs in the whole collection process, let alone the expense and the cost of human beings performing this kind of labor? What was your result in looking at all of those inputs?
Sure. So we did look at that, the ability to collect those mattresses separately for recycling in our current curbside cleanup model. And we did receive a proposal for what that would cost the city to add that additional truck on the streets during curbside cleanup. And again, I don't have that number in front of me now, but it significantly increased the cost of the curbside cleanup program. So if we were to add more trucks and kind of more companies going around during the cleanup, It just adds more cost to the program. So while it does,
And somehow doing it one house at a time under your voucher.
Excuse me,
system
sir.
costs.
Sir,
Yes.
we're over the 2 minutes for you here.
Oh,
And I think we want to close
I'm
up
sorry,
this.
but I'm not getting answers to my questions.
Yeah, if you could use the chat box, sir, we
I've
can
done that.
follow up
Yeah, I've
with
done
you
that.
on those
I'm not getting
questions.
answers there either.
We'll get back to you on those.
Thank
So
you.
at this time, we do
Thank
have
you.
about 2 minutes left. So I'm gonna sort of do a last call. If there's anybody else that wants to make any comments.
I just
Hi,
have a
this is, oh,
I just have a quick question about if you've studied the amount of electronics that were out on curbside pickup, if you've asked residents or did a survey at all to say, of those recyclable items that are at curbside cleanup, what's your probability of taking them to a drop-off day? Or are you just going to throw them away?
Thank you for that question, Alicia. And I think there was somebody else that wanted to speak.
well, yeah, this is Pat, and I have to say that part of dump days is just, it's easy because you just drag it to the front of your lawn. And I would imagine if people are going to have to somehow transport it and sit in a big line and drop it somewhere, that probably you are going to get less items, because I would imagine I would imagine the participation will go down. The harder you make it to do something, the less people will want to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Is there anybody else that did not get a chance to make a comment who wanted to? Okay, any final comments? We could take another one from anybody that has already spoken and has something burning that they want to share.
Back to the cost or
I'm sorry, what's that?
I think it's time for the commission and the staff to go back and ask the basic question, what are you really trying to accomplish here? Most of the material that it's picked up under the current plan does not digest in a landfill and create methane gas. I think there needs to be a little bit more science that goes into your studies. And weight is important because it's easy to measure. But the last time I checked, no landfill in the entire country has closed because it was too heavy. Weight is easy to measure, but that's not the real measurement we should be looking at. I think the staff and the commission needs to go back and ask, what are we trying to accomplish? Reduce costs, reduce BTU use? What effect might this possibly have on climate change? I think that a whole lot more serious science work needs to be done with this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so at this time, I think that I will direct any final thoughts to the chat box. We will continue to keep that open until we're completely finished. So please feel free, if you have additional comments or questions, to go ahead and put those in the chat box. And then I'm just going to go ahead here and have John kind of share the next steps with you.
All right, and can you hear me?
Yes, John.
So to wrap up, Laura covered these earlier, so I'll just recap. The next steps that we have planned are continuing to gather feedback through another listening session on March 23rd, and also through the online community survey. After analyzing that feedback, we'll report back to the City Council in early summer. As Laura mentioned, we may make changes based on the feedback that we receive. And Laura, do you, I can't remember how long that community survey stays open. How long is that open?
Until the end of March.
Okay. Okay, so with that, I'd just like to thank everybody for their participation this evening and for following along with our meeting agreements, so we could be sure to hear from everybody. So thank you very much for taking the time to come out. As a reminder, we have the survey out there at blm.mn/bulk, and you're able to answer questions, but also submit your comments in there as well in response to that. And again, we'll take those through the end of March. And we do have our next event on March 23rd. If you didn't get enough of us this evening and you want to join us again, you can certainly do that. But thank you for being engaged and sharing your voice tonight. And I hope everyone enjoys the rest of your evening. Thanks, everyone, and good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.